Right now, closing arguments in that big federal stop and frisk trial. Will the presiding judge rule that major changes to the NYPD's controversial policing House's Associated Press scandal was bad? Wait till you hear this. Department of Justice now under fire for spying on a Fox News journalist. We're going to have more on that story, plus an interesting debate. And later, Vito Lopez has left the building, but the pervy politician allegedly not throwing in the towel. Should he be allowed to have a second act running for the city council? Good evening and welcome to RFL. I'm Andrew Whitman, in tonight for Richard French. Thank you so much for joining us on this Monday evening, May the 20th. Lot to get to today in what should be a fast-paced hour of television. We begin with closing arguments in the federal civil rights trial over the NYPD's controversial stop and frisk program. Our own Dominic Carter was at the courtroom today. He joins us now with the very latest, and both sides bringing their cases and trying to hone that point to the judge.
Indeed, Andrew, closing arguments are over. The city of New York says there is, quote, no indication of racial motivation whatsoever in the practice of stop and frisk. This while we talk to one prior witness, a 24-year-old young man from Harlem who cried on the stand as he described how he was handcuffed and put into the back of a squad car. The 2.5-month trial is over. Lawyers for the city of New York argued the plaintiffs did not meet their burden of proof and an independent monitor for the NYPD is unnecessary and would be too costly. The chief spokesman for the NYPD, Deputy Commissioner Paul Brown, showed up to make the case. You were in court this morning. How do you think things went?
Well, I think the plaintiff's witnesses have made the case for us. I mean, to take who this case is named after, Floyd, somebody going through a bunch of keys, trying different keys, looking through a window. I think the people expect the police to make an inquiry of that. Reasonable suspicion.
Nicholas Pert also sat in the packed courtroom today. He was one of the witnesses.
It's, appalling with 84% of those who are stopped and frisked, Black and Latino. I felt that I had a moral obligation to be a part of this case because, this is not something that I want the young people in New York City to experience. Mothers should not have to prepare their children to be stopped and frisked and criminalized in the city.
And perhaps a huge blow to the city and a telling sign which way she is leaning, Judge Scheinlin from the bench hammered lawyers for the city with questions. She noted that nearly 90% of such stop and frisk are done in error. And with one of the key arguments from the NYPD that the amount of African Americans and Latinos committing the crimes, therefore they should be the ones stopped by police, Scheinlin said, quote, race then becomes a factor itself. That would be bad.
That's not the case at all. We're making stops based on suspicious activities. Yes, there's more crime in poor neighborhoods, and you'll see more suspicious activity in poor neighborhoods because there's more crime there. But that's based on protecting people who are the most vulnerable in this city. That's where we're putting our resources. There's some societies who put all their resources in rich neighborhoods and let the poor go to hell. We don't do that.
I have been celebrating my birthday. I had been with a cousin and a friend, and all of a sudden out of nowhere, squad cars surround us, and they came out with their guns drawn, demanding that we get down on the ground. And I couldn't understand why I was being stopped and frisked in that manner. I wasn't used to that type of aggression.
Andrew, the plaintiffs held a news conference concluding their case just about an hour ago, but don't expect to hear anything soon in terms of the ruling. That's not expected from Judge Scheinlin, Andrew, for at least 2 months.
How are we going to wait 2 months?
We want it now. We want it tomorrow, but it's not coming.
Dominic, you've watched a lot of this trial firsthand. We've heard personal stories from both sides, from the police sergeants who were instructing some of their troops, from some of the officers, and some of the people who said that they were stopped. Which are the personal stories that stuck in your mind from this trial the deepest, and which do you think might move the judge the most?
Well, remember, Judge Scheinlin already has a past ruling against the NYPD several times. So You have to consider her past, and you never know with a judge, especially a federal judge, which way he or she may go. The part that stood out to me the most, Andrew, would be I would have loved to have seen Police Commissioner Kelly testify. He did not. But Chief F. Esposito, plus the whistleblower testimonies, the tapes that were secretly recorded and played in trial. We're looking at the judge, but we were looking at the judge just a second ago. She's the wild card factor in this. Remember, the large federal courtroom, no jury. This is all on Judge Scheinlein. And, you know, I've been covering trials now for about 25 years. And the first time I covered a federal trial was many years ago, Judge Denny Chin. And so sitting in this courtroom today, I was a bit shocked, to be honest with you. And I don't know if it's part of the federal protocol, but normally in closing arguments, a judge sits there and listens. Judge Scheinlein did not do that. She tore the city apart. They were stumbling and staggering in terms of not knowing how to respond, and she was firing away question after question at them, at the city, and not necessarily at the plaintiffs. But that doesn't mean that she's going to rule against the city. That's just what she did today.
But I've gotten the sense from your coverage of this trial that you think maybe she's leaning towards the plaintiffs in this case.
I think that's fair to say, but I think with any federal judge, you never know which way they're going to go.
All right,
It's going to be very interesting.
I want to bring in the entire panel, and first I want to introduce the entire panel. Thanks for joining us tonight. Jeannie Zaino, political science professor at Iona College. Dominic, of course, you just heard from. Richard St. Paul, Republican strategist and former vice chair at the National Black Republican Association. And Michael Tobman, principal at Hudson TG and former advisor to Senator Chuck Schumer. Guys, thank you all very much. First of all, I wouldn't, if you guys want to hazard a guess as to what you think the outcome of this case is going to be, have at it. But do you think that the policy of stop and frisk, we're going to see it go away even if the judge rules against the city in this case, or will it just morph into something else?
I don't think it's going to go away. To answer your question, Dominic, as an attorney, I don't know if I'm the only attorney here, but the closing statement is not evidence, so a judge needs not pay attention to it. It's mostly done for a jury to put all the evidence together of what we prove. So the judge doesn't care about closing statements, not evidence.
But there is no jury in this case.
There's no jury.
That's why. That's because the judge doesn't care about it, because a closing statement is not evidence.
So then, Counselor, is it normal for a federal judge to fire away questions during the closing argument?
Because there's no jury there, it doesn't matter. Exactly.
It doesn't matter. And also, as an attorney, it's the judge. It's the judge's courtroom, especially in the federal practice. It's the judge can do.
I've never seen that done before in 25 years. I've never seen it done before.
But this segues into hazarding a guess, which is to say it depends on, and that's a lawyer's favorite answer. It depends. It depends on what frame the judge takes in looking at this. If it is purely through a racial lens, which would be an appropriate lens given the volume of numbers and how truly shocking the numbers are, that'll head in one direction. But if it's based on, as Mr. Brown said, this is where the crime is, and if it happens to be in communities of color, well then so be it. Some societies put all their money and their policing resources into rich areas. New York City doesn't do it. If it's an economic issue,
unacceptable.
Unacceptable is not the same as a decision.
And in terms of, I think, what's going to happen, we're going to see an appeal no matter how she goes. So this thing is going to go on 60 days and then a lot longer than that. So I think it's going to be a while before we have a policy answer on this thing.
And 60 days is well under, we're 100 days away from the Democratic primary for mayor. So this is going to provide plenty of fodder for the political campaign.
And lastly, let me just say that I think this, what we'll see is similar to what happened in Philadelphia, where the ACLU sued the city of Philadelphia, where the judge ordered that they had to have better training in stop and frisk, and where they actually had to have reasonable suspicion. Reasonable suspicion means you have to have some reason to stop somebody. I think the big hang up here is that we'll see is that the police officers were not only stopping and frisking, but they were searching.
But they want to monitor. The plaintiffs want an independent
It's
monitor.
the same thing in Philadelphia. They have a monitor too. So I think you'll see something similar to, you'll see the judge say you need better training, and you can't search somebody unless you have probable cause. You can stop, you can frisk, but you can't go through their pockets.
If the numbers present themselves as being important to this judge, then it will head in a certain direction. In New York City, the numbers are always bigger, the crimes are always bigger, the noise is always bigger, the media attention is bigger. If it was any other city, like we said in Philadelphia, and then we had similar situations in Baltimore as well, and LA is dealing with this as well, where we have a former New York City police commissioner running that program. But if you start with the end result, which is you can't have this, well then the judge will figure out how to not have this. But if you start with this is where the crime is, And, you know, if it's the neighborhood has a different complexion later on, so be it.
I'm curious for the take of the two attorneys plus everybody else, but I want to start over here on this because is it to your mind the numbers in this case that make all the difference, that you've got 90% plus precincts where it's black and Hispanic people who are being stopped and frisked, or is it the individual case-by-case basis? There was no probable cause. The treatment that individuals are getting. Or is it the individual story or the totality of the numbers?
Well, I think you got to look at this. Okay, so the city is saying we have a compelling governmental interest in this stop and frisk program, right? Whenever you have a compelling government interest, that has to outweigh some type of personal liberty, or to the extent some uncomfortableness. Okay, and being stopped for just walking down the street, that's uncomfortable.
Yeah.
So the government's saying we have a compelling government interest. And what is our compelling government interest? Getting guns off the street. Now they've got, there's 600,000 people stopped. There were probably 1,000 guns. It's like 0.5% of all the people stopped. There was 1,000. No, 1,000 guns is a lot. That can kill a lot of people. So I think you're going to find that the judge is going to balance this out where they keep the policy, but they have to revamp it.
The city will be rejecting the underlying premise that this is about race, and that it's about public safety and it's about a compelling interest, because only when you implicate a protected class, race, national origin or alienage, that you need to justify what the government is doing. If you say this isn't about race, this is about crime, well then it's not about race.
And I'm glad you framed it that way, because I want to get to in our next segment the numbers in their totality. And here's where I'm going with it. I wanted to know if percentages alone are proof of discrimination. You've got the stop and frisk numbers. We've also had reports from the FDNY, their hiring practices, more than 90% white. If the results come out that lopsided in a city where the populations of individual groups are not that lopsided, does that alone make it discriminatory, or do you have to prove that a group uses discriminatory housing practices? We're going to get into some of the details coming up after the break, but here's one thing to keep in mind. 13% of all Americans African American, 40% of all prison inmates are African American. Is that discrimination? Does it need to be addressed? Our panel's going to sound off on that and more when we come back. Stay with us.
I'm a retired police officer, and what happened to us is that my son was arrested, and when me and my wife went to the precinct, the 3-0 precinct, we all got arrested. Within 5 minutes, they just criminalized the whole entire family. We support the police. I just want you to understand that we do support the police, but what we would like is that they do it in a fair and balanced way, because what had happened to us is unacceptable.